All right, so we're diving into atomic habits
Yeah.
today, specifically this video summary that you sent over.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
gotta say, I'm a little skeptical about this whole tiny changes lead to massive results thing,
Sure.
but I'm ready to be convinced.
Well, that skepticism is healthy.
Okay.
It's easy to just dismiss the power of small changes,
Yeah.
you know, especially in a world that's obsessed with these quick fixes, overnight transformations, and all that stuff.
Right, right.
But what I think is fascinating about atomic habits is that it's really grounded in this science of how our brains work.
Okay, so that piqued my interest. So where do we even start with this whole science of habits thing?
Well,
The video mentioned something called the habit loop.
yeah,
Is that kind of what we're talking about?
exactly. The habit loop is essentially this neurological feedback loop that drives like all our habits, good and bad.
Okay.
Um, think of it this way. It starts with a cue,
Okay.
something in your environment or your internal state that kind of triggers the habit.
So like if I walk into the kitchen and I see cookies on the counter, that's the cue.
Perfect example.
Okay.
That visual cue triggers a craving, which is the desire for the reward associated with the habit.
Okay.
So in that case, it might be the taste of the cookie, the feeling of satisfaction,
Right.
or even just the distraction from boredom, whatever it is.
Okay, got it. So then I eat the cookie.
Right.
That's the response of the actual habit itself.
Uh-huh.
But where does the loop part come in?
Yeah, the loop is completed by the reward, which reinforces the entire cycle.
Okay.
So that feeling of pleasure you get from eating the cookie strengthens the connection between the cue, the craving, and the response, making it more likely that you're going to repeat that habit in the future.
So it's like my brain is saying, hey, remember that time you saw those cookies and you ate one?
Yeah,
That felt good. Let's do it again.
exactly.
Okay, but how do we break out of that loop, especially for those not so healthy habits?
That's where James Clear's 4 laws of behavior change come in.
Okay.
They provide a really practical framework for kind of hacking the habit loop, both for building good habits and for breaking the bad ones.
All right, break it down for me.
Okay.
What are these laws?
Think of them as 4 levers you can pull to influence your behavior.
Okay.
Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could be useful.
Yeah.
But it still seems a bit abstract.
Sure.
Can we take like one of those laws and apply it to a real-world example?
Absolutely. Let's make it obvious. So say you want to build the habit of drinking more water throughout the day.
Okay.
You could apply this law by placing a full water bottle on your desk, like right where you can't miss it.
So by making that water bottle super visually prominent,
Yeah,
you're essentially creating a cue that triggers the desire to drink.
exactly.
It's like you're reminding your brain, hey, hydrate.
Uh-huh. And the more you repeat that behavior, the stronger the association becomes between the cue, seeing the water bottle, and the response, drinking water.
Got it. But it's not just about visual cues, right?
Right.
The video also talks about something called habit stacking,
Yes.
which is basically attaching a new habit to an existing one.
Exactly.
Can you give me an example of how that works?
Yeah. Let's say you want to start like a daily meditation practice. You could stack it onto an existing habit, like brushing your teeth.
Okay.
So after you brush your teeth each morning, you meditate for like 5 minutes.
Got it. So you're using the already established habit of brushing your teeth as a trigger for this new habit of meditation.
Exactly. It's like building this chain reaction of positive habits. You're using the momentum of one to initiate the next.
That's pretty cool.
And what's even more interesting is that it taps into this whole psychology of anchoring.
Anchoring, I'm not familiar with that term.
Yeah, so in psychology, anchoring refers to this tendency to rely heavily on the first piece of information we receive when we're making decisions.
Okay.
So in the case of habit stacking, you're essentially anchoring this new habit to an existing routine that's already deeply ingrained in your brain.
So it's not just reminding myself to do something, it's strategically linking it to a behavior that's already on autopilot.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. What about making habits attractive?
Mhm.
How does that play into all of this?
This is where we can get a little creative
Okay.
and use our own psychology to our advantage. Remember how we were talking about cravings being driven by the anticipation of a reward?
Yeah.
Where we can actually manipulate that anticipation to make desired habits more appealing.
Okay, now you're talking my language. Give me some practical examples of how we can do that.
Okay, one technique is called temptation bundling,
Okay.
and this involves pairing something you need to do with something you want to do.
Okay, I like where this is going.
So, for example, if you dread doing your taxes,
Oh, don't remind me.
you could bundle it with watching your favorite show.
Oh, that's smart. I like that.
So you're basically tricking your brain into associating this dreaded task with something enjoyable.
I have to admit, that's pretty clever. But it's not just about individual strategies, is it?
No, it's not. It's also about the environment you create for yourself.
Ah, the power of our surroundings. We were talking about those visual cues earlier,
Uh-huh.
but it sounds like there's more to it than that.
Absolutely. Our environment can either support or sabotage our efforts to build good habits.
So if I'm trying to eat healthier,
Yeah,
it's probably not the best idea to have a bowl of candy sitting on my desk all the time.
exactly. And that's where this concept of friction comes in.
Friction, what does that have to do with habits?
Friction in this context refers to anything that makes it harder to perform a desired behavior.
Okay.
The more friction there is, the less likely you are to actually follow through with the habit.
So by removing those temptations and minimizing frictions,
Yeah,
we're essentially making it easier to make those healthier choices.
exactly. And that leads us to the third law, make it easy. This principle is all about reducing the effort required to perform the habit,
Okay.
so making it more likely that you'll stick with it.
I'm starting to see how all these laws kind of work together. But what about making things satisfying? Isn't that just about rewarding ourselves?
It is about rewards, but it's more nuanced than that. It's about understanding how our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Right.
When we experience something pleasurable, our brain releases dopamine, which reinforces the behavior and makes us want to repeat it.
So if we can make our desired habits feel good,
Yeah,
we're more likely to stick with them.
exactly.
But how do we do that in a way that's actually sustainable?
Right?
I mean, I can't reward myself with cake every time I go for a run.
That's a great point. The rewards don't have to be extravagant or unhealthy.
Right.
They just have to be meaningful to you.
Okay.
And sometimes the reward is simply the feeling of accomplishment or the satisfaction of making progress toward a goal.
So it's about finding ways to celebrate those small wins and reinforce those positive feelings associated with the habit.
Exactly.
But how do we actually track those wins and stay motivated over time?
One really effective strategy is using a habit tracker.
Okay.
There's something incredibly satisfying about visually seeing your progress, checking off those boxes each day. It creates a sense of accomplishment and keeps you accountable.
I've tried habit trackers in the past, but I always seem to lose steam after a few weeks.
Yeah.
What's the secret to making them actually work?
I think the key is to find a system that works for you
Okay.
and integrate it into your daily routine.
Uh-huh.
Some people prefer digital trackers, while others find pen and paper more motivating.
Right.
The important thing is to make it a consistent part of your day, like brushing your teeth or checking your email.
So make the habit tracker itself a habit. I like it.
Uh-huh.
But I gotta admit, I'm still a little hung up on this whole small changes thing.
Sure.
How can we be sure that these tiny actions are actually making a difference?
That's where the magic of compounding comes in.
Okay.
It's the same principle that applies to investing small, consistent contributions over time can lead to exponential growth.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Yeah,
But let's be honest, building new habits and breaking old ones can be really tough.
it can be.
How do we stay motivated when things get challenging?
That's where the concept of identity-based habits comes in.
Okay.
It's about shifting your focus from simply achieving outcomes to building an identity that aligns with those outcomes.
So instead of saying, I want to lose weight,
Yeah,
I'd say I'm a healthy person.
exactly. It's a subtle but really profound shift and mindset.
But how does simply changing the way I think about myself actually lead to lasting change?
It's about aligning your actions with that desired identity.
Okay.
When you see yourself as a healthy person,
Uh-huh.
you're more likely to make choices that support that identity.
So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The
Yeah.
more I act like a healthy person, the more I believe I am one,
Right?
and the easier it becomes to actually make those healthy choices.
Exactly. And that's what's so powerful about identity-based habits. They create this virtuous cycle of belief in action.
I'm really liking this.
But we'll dive deeper into this in the next part of our deep dive.
I'm already looking forward to it. This has been incredibly insightful.
It's just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh boy.
We still have much to explore, including how to break those bad habits and this fascinating world of keystone habits.
Well, I'm ready to keep diving. Okay, so last time we left off talking about how powerful those identity-based habits can be.
Right.
But I gotta admit, even if I start thinking of myself as, say, a runner,
Uh-huh.
that doesn't magically make me lace up my shoes and hit the pavement.
You're absolutely right. It's not about just flipping a switch in your mind. The real magic happens when you start taking action.
Okay.
But not just any action, actions that align with that identity you're trying to build.
So it's not enough to just declare I am a runner.
Right.
I actually have to, run.
Exactly. And this is where those small wins we talked about earlier become so crucial.
Okay.
Each time you lace up your shoes and go for a run, even if it's just for a few minutes, you're proving to yourself that you are a runner.
I see. It's about building evidence for that new identity.
Exactly.
But what if I stumble? What if I skip a run or two? Does that mean I've failed at becoming a runner?
Not at all. Setbacks are a natural part of the process.
Okay.
Remember, we're aiming for progress, not perfection. The key is to not let those setbacks derail you completely.
So it's about getting back on track and not letting a few missed runs shatter my entire self-image as a runner.
Precisely. And that's where self-compassion comes in.
Okay.
It's about treating yourself with same kindness and understanding that you would offer a friend who's struggling.
That makes sense, but what about willpower?
Yeah.
It seems like we need a lot of it to stick to these new habits, especially when we're first starting out.
Willpower is definitely important, but it's often misunderstood.
Okay.
We tend to think of it as this limited resource that we deplete throughout the day.
Right, like I only have so much willpower.
But what's more important is how we manage our environment and our habits to reduce our reliance on willpower in the first place.
So instead of relying on sheer willpower to resist those cookies on the counter,
Yeah,
I should just remove them from the equation altogether.
exactly. It's about making the desired behavior the path of least resistance.
Okay.
And that's where the 4 laws of behavior change come in handy.
Right, those 4 letters we talked about earlier.
Uh-huh.
Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying.
By strategically applying those laws, we can create an environment that supports our desired habits and minimizes our reliance on willpower.
So it's not just about trying harder, it's about being smarter about how we set ourselves up for success.
Exactly.
But what about those times when we do slip up? How do we recover from those setbacks and get back on track?
One powerful tool is to have a plan in place for when those inevitable slip-ups occur. James Clear drives this an implementation intention.
Implementation intention, it sounds a bit technical.
It's actually quite simple.
Okay.
It's basically an if-then statement that pre-commits you to a specific action when faced with a particular situation.
Can you give me a concrete example of how that works?
Sure, let's say your goal is to eat healthier, but you tend to overindulge at social gatherings.
Oh yeah, been there.
You could create an implementation intention that says, if I'm at a party and feel tempted to overeat, then I will choose one healthy option from the buffet and focus on enjoying the conversations.
So it's about having a predetermined plan of action
Yeah,
that removes the need for decision-making in the moment when willpower might be low.
exactly. It's like giving your future self a set of instructions for navigating those tricky situations.
I like that.
But it's not just about having a plan. It's also about learning from those slip-ups.
So instead of beating ourselves up when we stumble,
Yeah,
we should try to understand why it happened and how we can prevent it in the future.
precisely. Every setback is an opportunity for learning and growth. By analyzing those moments, we can identify patterns in our behavior and make adjustments to our environment or our strategies.
This whole approach to habit change feels a lot less daunting when you frame it as a learning process rather than a test of willpower.
I agree. It's about embracing the journey with all its twists and turns rather than striving for some unattainable ideal of perfection.
I also love how Atomic Habits emphasizes the interconnectedness of our habits. It's not just about changing one behavior in isolation. It's about understanding how our habits influence each other.
That's where the concept of keystone habits comes into play.
Right.
These are habits that, when established, have a ripple effect, positively influencing other areas of our lives.
Can you give me some examples of these keystone habits?
One classic example is exercise.
Okay.
When people start exercising regularly, they often experience a cascade of positive changes in other areas of their lives.
Like they might start eating healthier, sleeping better, or feeling more energized and focused throughout the day.
Exactly. Exercise becomes this catalyst for a healthier lifestyle, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as well.
So by focusing on building one keystone habit, we can set off a chain reaction of positive change.
Precisely. And what's interesting is that these keystone habits often seem small and insignificant at first.
So it's not always about making these sweeping changes.
No.
It's about identifying those pivotal habits that can unlock a whole new level of well-being.
That's right. And the key to finding those keystone habits is to understand your own values and priorities.
So it's about asking ourselves, what's truly important to me?
Yeah,
And then identifying the habits that will support those values.
exactly. And once you've identified those keystone habits, you can start applying the 4 laws of behavior change to make them more obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying.
But what about those bad habits that we're trying to break? Does the same approach apply?
Absolutely. Breaking bad habits is essentially the reverse of building good ones. We simply apply the 4 laws in reverse.
So instead of making the habit obvious, we make it invisible.
Uh-huh.
And instead of making it attractive, we make it unattractive.
Precisely. It's about increasing the friction associated with the bad habit and minimizing the rewards.
Can you give me some specific examples of how we can do that?
Let's say you're trying to cut back on social media. To make it invisible, you could delete the apps from your phone or log out of your accounts on your computer. To make it unattractive, You could remind yourself of the negative impacts of excessive social media use, like decreased productivity or increased anxiety.
And to make it difficult, you could use a website blocker to limit your access to social media sites.
Exactly. And to make it unsatisfying, you could set a timer for your social media use and force yourself to stop when the timer goes off, even if you're in the middle of something.
I'm starting to see how all these strategies work together to create this powerful system for change.
Yeah,
But what about motivation? How do we stay motivated over the long haul, especially when progress can feel slow?
that's where the concept of inspiration comes in.
Okay.
It's about finding something that fuels your passion and reminds you why you started on this journey in the first place.
So it's not just about willpower or discipline.
No.
It's about connecting with something that gives us a deeper sense of purpose.
Exactly, and that inspiration can come from a variety of sources. It might be a personal hero, a cause you believe in, or even a vision of your future self.
It's about finding something that resonates with your values and aspirations, something that lights a fire within you.
Right,
But how do we keep that fire burning?
yeah,
It's so easy to get discouraged when we face setbacks or when progress feels slow.
that's true. And I think one of the best ways to stay inspired is to surround yourself with people who support your goals and believe in your potential.
So it's about creating a community of like-minded individuals who
Ah.
can encourage us and hold us accountable.
Exactly. And it's also about celebrating our successes along the way, no matter how small they may seem.
Oh, okay.
It's about acknowledging our progress and recognizing how far we've come. And I think it's also helpful to revisit our sources of inspiration regularly.
So whether that's reading a book, listening to a podcast, or simply spending time in nature,
Yeah,
it's important to reconnect with what fuels our passion and reminds us why we started on this journey in the first place.
exactly.
I love that idea. It's all about creating this positive feedback loop of inspiration and action.
Exactly. And the more we cultivate that loop, the more momentum we build and the easier it becomes to stick to our habits and achieve our goals. It's like a virtuous cycle of growth and transformation.
Absolutely. It's been such a fascinating conversation so far,
It has.
and it really highlights how multifaceted this topic is.
It's true. There's so much more to habit change than simply setting goals and hoping for the best. It's about understanding our own psychology, creating a supportive environment, and finding ways to stay motivated over the long term.
Well, this has given me so much to think about already.
Good.
I'm excited to see what other insights we uncover in the final part of our deep dive.
Me too. We still have much to explore, including some of the common pitfalls people encounter when trying to change their habits and how to avoid them.
Sounds like a plan. All right, I'm ready for the final leg of our deep dive into atomic habits. In the last two parts, we've covered so much ground, from understanding how habits work to building systems that support our goals. But I'm curious, what are some of the biggest pitfalls people face when trying to put these ideas into practice?
One common mistake is trying to change too many habits at once.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
It's like trying to juggle like a dozen balls at the same time. You're likely to drop them all. A better approach is to focus on one or two key habits at a time.
So it's about being selective and prioritizing the habits that will have the biggest impact.
Exactly.
But how do we know which habits to prioritize?
That's where understanding your values and goals comes in. Remember those keystone habits we talked about?
Yeah,
Those are the ones that can create a ripple effect, positively influencing other areas of your life.
right, like exercise leading to better sleep, increased energy, even a healthier diet.
Exactly.
But how do we identify our own keystone habits? Is there a formula for that?
It's more about introspection than a formula. Ask yourself, what's truly important to me? What kind of person do I want to become? Once you have a clear sense of your values and aspirations, you can start to identify the habits that will support those goals.
So it's about aligning our habits with our deepest desires and aspirations.
Exactly.
But even when we know which habits to prioritize, staying motivated over the long haul can be tough. What are some strategies for maintaining momentum when we hit those inevitable plateaus or setbacks?
One powerful technique is to focus on the process rather than the outcome.
Okay.
Instead of obsessing over the number on the scale or the size of your bank account, focus on enjoying the journey of becoming healthier or wealthier.
So it's about finding joy in the daily actions,
Yeah.
even when progress seems slow.
Exactly.
But what about those times when we really do slip up? How do we recover from those setbacks without getting discouraged?
Self-compassion is crucial. Remember, you're human, not a robot. Everyone makes mistakes. The key is to treat yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a friend who's struggling.
So instead of beating myself up for missing a workout or indulging in a sugary treat,
Uh-huh.
I should acknowledge the slip up, learn from it, and move on.
Exactly. It's about adopting a growth mindset, viewing those setbacks as opportunities for learning and growth rather than as failures. And remember, even small steps forward are still progress. Celebrate those wins, no matter how small they may seem.
This whole approach feels a lot less daunting when you frame it as a process of continuous improvement rather than a quest for perfection. But what about those bad habits that seem almost impossible to break? Are there any specific strategies for tackling those deeply ingrained patterns?
One technique that could be particularly effective is called habit replacement. Instead of simply trying to eliminate a bad habit, you identify a more desirable behavior to substitute for it.
So, for example, if I'm trying to break the habit of mindlessly scrolling through social media when I'm bored,
Yeah,
I could replace that behavior with reading a book or going for a walk.
exactly. It's about redirecting that energy and attention towards something more fulfilling and aligned with your goals. But remember, breaking any habit takes time and effort. Don't get discouraged if you don't see results overnight.
So, it's about being patient with ourselves and trusting the process. But how do we know if we're actually making progress? Are there any signs we should be looking for?
One indicator is that the habit starts to feel more automatic. Remember the habit loop.
Hmm.
As you repeat a behavior, the connection between the cue, the craving, and the response becomes stronger, requiring less conscious effort.
So, if I'm trying to build the habit of meditating every morning and I find myself naturally reaching for my meditation cushion without even thinking about it,
Right.
that's a good sign.
Absolutely. It means the habit is starting to become ingrained in your routine. Another sign of progress is that you start to identify with the new habit. Remember those identity-based habits we talked about?
Yeah.
As you consistently engage in a behavior, it starts to become part of your self-image.
So, if I'm regularly going for runs, I might start to see myself as a runner,
Uh-huh.
even if I never considered myself one before.
Exactly. It's a subtle but powerful shift in mindset. And as that identity becomes more solidified, it reinforces the habit, making it more likely you'll stick with it.
It's fascinating how our actions can actually shape our beliefs about ourselves.
It is.
But what about those times when we feel stuck? What if we've hit a plateau and don't seem to be making any progress?
Sometimes we need to shake things up a bit. One way to do that is to experiment with different strategies. Remember the 4 laws of behavior change?
Yeah.
Try tweaking one of those levers to see if it makes a difference.
So, for example, if I'm trying to build the habit of writing every day, but I'm struggling to find the time,
Uh-huh.
I could try making it more obvious by setting a specific time and place for writing,
Right.
or making it more attractive by listening to my favorite music while I write.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you and being willing to adjust your approach as needed. And remember, progress isn't always linear. There will be ups and downs, plateaus, and breakthroughs.
This has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of how habits work and how I can leverage them to create positive change in my life.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. Remember, the key takeaway is that small changes consistently applied can lead to remarkable results.
And that those small changes start with understanding ourselves, setting clear intentions, and creating systems that support our goals.
Exactly. It's about embracing the journey of becoming the best version of yourself, one small habit at a time.
Well, I'm ready to get started. Thanks for guiding me through this deep dive.
You're welcome. Now go out there and make those atomic changes.